From Kevin Smith's new Smodcastle Cinemas video label comes director Vincent Pereira's 1997 A Better Place, the director's cut on Blu-ray. This is a film that I remember seeing when it first hit videotape back in the late 90s. And I'll get into the specs, and then I'll get into what it is and what you get for this new version. It is, as I said, a Blu-ray. It's 86 minutes long, written and directed by Vincent Pereira, and starring Eion Bailey, Robert DiPatri, Joseph Cassese, Carmen Llywelyn, Jason Lee, Ethan Suplee, Scott Mosier, and Vincent Pereira. Those latter names that you may recognize from the world of Kevin Smith and some other films are relatively minor roles. I think Jason Lee, of all of them, probably gets the most screen time in it, but it is a View Askew production, executive produced by Scott Mosier and Kevin Smith, and it is presented in 5.1 audio with 5.1 surround audio with optional English subtitles. This originally had a VHS release, and then Synapse put it out on DVD. And as far as I know, this is the first Blu-ray edition of this with all the archival extras, and there's a lot of them, and then some new extras tacked onto that as well. So Vincent Pereira was a friend of Kevin Smith, worked on the Kevin Smith films that you know and love, and Kevin Smith was always a really good guy to his friends, and he would include them in the filmmaking process and what he did, and also would help foster the ability for them to make their own films like A Better Place and like Vulgar and some other things. So this is a story it's an indie film. It's a story about a young guy whose father dies unexpectedly, and his mother and he move to a new town on the Jersey Shore, or Jersey Shore-ish, shall we say. Atlantic Highlands area of New Jersey, and he can't get a break. Nobody wants to talk to him. He's getting bullied at school. Everybody's treating him at trash like school, and the only kid who seems to give him the time of day and treat him like a human being is another outcast kid who has been orphaned. His parents both died in a car accident, and he's living with his aunt, who would be very much happier if he wasn't there, and her kind of hang-around boyfriend portrayed by Jason Lee. And these two guys meet each other. The alienated orphan guy is the only guy who will give the new kid in town the time of day, even though the alienated orphan kid is incredibly antisocial and has very grim views on the world and society fostered by his reading of various philosophers and things like that. And they form this kind of, mutual misfit society of pals who kind of bum around and share their thoughts on life. Unfortunately, the thoughts of the orphaned local boy are increasingly dark, and the situations they get themselves into are initially fun and thumbing nose at society mischief, and increasingly turn into things that are a pathway that are a way that maybe they really shouldn't be going, and certainly the new kid in town does not want to be going, and he has to struggle with how much he appreciates and respects this kid for taking him in, but also, wow, maybe this isn't the way to do things in life. So the film gets very, very dark, and it goes to not a better place ultimately for these people. And it's pretty good. It's very much an indie film. It has a little rough around the edges feel. The transfer looks really good, and Vincent Pereira has a short introduction that you can play before the film, and he talks about how some additional work has been done on the film to make it look a bit better, fix some things that were problematic, some effects that didn't quite work before. Nothing that stood out to me. It wasn't like putting Jabba back into the first Star Wars movie where you're like, that doesn't belong there. If you didn't tell me that anything had been tweaked to this film, I never would have known. He mentioned that it was originally a $50,000 16mm production. It looks really good for a $50,000 16mm production. And it's got an indie sort of student film vibe to it, not necessarily in a bad way. While I was watching it, occasionally I wished maybe that there had been a little bit more coverage, cutting back and forth between people in some of the scenes. But you do what you can when you're making a film, on a shoestring with limited resources. I don't fault the man at all. I always applaud anybody who can get a film finished and released, let alone re-released down the road and upgraded in multiple formats and things like that. And it looks and sounds quite good for what it is. And it's sharp, colorful, vibrant, the grain where it should be. And extras, audio commentary, archival commentary, the aforementioned intro, I should say, with Vincent Pereira is about 2 minutes long. And then you have archival commentary with the director, cast, and crew. You get the 2001 version of A Better Place. So this was the Synapse DVD. There's a ton of stuff on there. You get the 2001 cut of the film, which runs 85 minutes. And I don't mean like the 2001 cut in that there's like chimps banging bones around a monolith at the beginning. I mean, this is the released version that came out in the year 2001. That's 85 minutes, and it looks like it did on that DVD. You get the 2001 cut with optional goof commentary, which is the same people who had just recorded the regular commentary. Sound like they're a little bit liquored up and just having fun and doing funny voices and all that. I didn't listen to too much of that because I found the original commentary very interesting. A lot of times I find commentaries more interesting if they are done with some distance. Like if there had been a new commentary looking back at this film, that might have been, to me personally, a little more interesting than the goof commentary. But the commentary that was recorded at the time, sometimes those devolve when it's a cast and crew commentary, like right after a film has been made or not long after a film has been made. Sometimes it's just a lot of goofing around and people ragging on each other and mocking themselves and all that. But anyway, the archival commentary from 2001 is very interesting, and it just gives you a lot of the nuts and bolts of how they achieved certain things, what they were going to do but didn't, how new ideas were brought in. It just gives you an insight in how an indie film on a shoestring was made. The goof commentary is just them being silly. So if you like those people, or you really like the movie, it's more time spent with them just being silly. The 2001 cut, there are 3 introductions that were done by Kevin Smith and Scott Mosier around the time of the 2001 release, and it's just done like in their office, and they're all very funny. One of them, number 1 is 6 minutes, number 2 is 4 minutes, and number 3 is 4 minutes. You get 17 deleted scenes with optional director commentary. You get a minute and a half of outtakes and bloopers. You get a minute and a half trailer, and you have an option to play all of the introductions, which include the Kevin Smith and Scott Mosier vintage introductions and Vincent Pereira's new introduction. You get trailers for other films that MVD has released. This is Smodcastle Cinemas, but it also is actually, no, is it? What? Hey, ho, let's go. Sorry, sometimes my brain gets in a knot. These may be other Smodcastle Cinemas releases. They may be MVD releases. I think they're all Kevin Smith related. Wrong Reasons, which I know is produced by Kevin Smith and he had a hand in. Clerk, the documentary about Kevin Smith. Film Hawk, which is a documentary about indie film guy who helped out Kevin Smith and a lot of 90s indie filmmakers. Looks really interesting. Max Reload and the Nether Blasters, which is a sci-fi comedy, which looks like a lot of fun. I remember seeing the box cover when it came out, but it looks like really good effects on film. It's probably relatively low budget. And a film called Big Helium Dog, which involves some of the people who were involved with A Better Place. So those are all the extras and the specs. And is back to the film itself. I'm all over the place with this one. Back to the film itself. If you like indie films, if you like films about troubled youth, like an Over the Edge, let's say, if you are interested in a film that might get into how does someone become a violent kid? How does someone become a school shooter? How does someone become someone that nobody ever thinks twice about and suddenly they do something very heinous? This is a film that kind of delves into the psychology of that. And it's, again, if you like Kevin Smith films, it's got a lot of peripheral Kevin Smith people and is shot in and around the places that Kevin Smith shoots his films. So packaging and all that. Smodcastle Cinema's A Better Place. You get a nice little slipcase with a graphic on it, front and back, information that's too small for you to read on the screen. And then you slip that slipcase off to reveal the same thing beneath, front and back. And you crack it open and you get that graphic on the disc. And this little thing that reminds me of the old Blockbuster or Disney or some company used to do that. And then we have a reversible cover, which that was basically either the poster art or the original box cover art for previous releases of this. So it's an interesting film. It's interesting for the as being an indie film from the late 90s. It has that aesthetic. It has that sound to the soundtrack and things like that. Or if you're just a huge fan of Kevin Smith and the satellite releases from Smodcast or from View Askew Productions, this is one of those. So available on Blu-ray now is A Better Place Director's Cut from Smodcastle Cinemas.